All right, hello again. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. We've got some fascinating documents from the Milwaukee Coalition Music back in 1965, and we're going to look at their demands to the all-white school board who refused to integrate, and we're going to see that those demands really aren't that different from what we're talking about today. So we're going to get into that. There is also a letter there from Llyod Barbee to the Secretary of Education asking them to investigate Milwaukee Public Schools and withhold funding from Milwaukee Public Schools. So I think those are, the more things change, the more things stay the same. If you hear me going into French, it won't be my fault. So that's what we have in store today. Let's take it away, Ben. All right, say it with me now. Milwaukee United Intergration Committee Association. God darn it. It's because I can't spell music. But Milwaukee United School Integration Committee. It's just so beautiful that we wanted to highlight it. But dang it, that phrase doesn't roll off my lips. All right, here's a general letter to the public, sort of like a call to a march here that they're this is the Milwaukee March, okay? And it says it's basically harking back to the march in Washington, D.C., and now it's saying the march in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, both on April 28th. You are invited to attend the Milwaukee March Towards Freedom and Independence on August 28th. If you were not directly concerned with that historic march 2 years ago, this is a new opportunity to publicly commit yourself to the continual struggle for human rights. Share the determination of Milwaukee's social, civic, religious, professional, political, and civil rights organizations in that concern. That's what I call writing. The march will begin at 2 p.m. Saturday and goes from 12th Street to West Llyod. That's, we'll give you some pictures of that sometime. And heading to downtown, that's MacArthur Square, a place we'll reserve for you. Will you be there? Now that's what I call writing. All right. All right, here we're going back in time a little bit to May of 65. I do love how errata was just tolerated back then. But, what are you going to do? Type the whole thing over again? I love that attitude, frankly. Okay. Here we go. A demand to the school board. Dear school board directors, a year has passed since the school board refused to adopt a policy recognizing the injustice of segregated, unequal education and to plan realistically to correct the problems in this city. Salient evils which have been prolonged and increased through this refusal are, the segregation which results from intact busing. So we have and had this system of busing, basically. Picture the situation in 1965, if you will. Two aspects. One, identically the same today. There are completely segregated neighborhoods to the point where you can walk from one side of the street, everything's great, to the other side of the street, complete disaster. Like that. You've never experienced it if you haven't been in a U.S. city, that's for sure. And the other thing that will go along is one side will be white and the other side will be black. It also can be where socioeconomically things are more relatively the same on one side of the street to the other, but everybody knows one side is white or whatever, and the other side is Hmong or, in this case, black, okay? So they may have had schools, special magnet schools, Montessori schools back then, whatever, but there was intact busing from one neighborhood to the school, okay? Now, to some extent, the segregation in Milwaukee's schools is different than it used to be. And I think we should probably pause here for a second or two to look at what those numbers are today. All right, well, I can tell you that the breakdown at MPS currently, this is, back to 19, 54% African-American, 20% Hispanic, 7% Asian, 11% white. Wow. economically disadvantaged apparently is 82%. Non is 18%. Wow. That is... we're going to have another video and just compare some two here, but I'm going to keep back here. Sorry. What a... when you found demographic data, sometimes it's hard to hold on to yourself. Choice of building sites which will increase the number of segregated schools. Okay, so that's sort of what we're talking about, is the new sites that they want to build. Where they're going to build them is just going to exacerbate the problem. At this time, music, representing large numbers of indignant citizens, hereby demands that Superintendent Vincent immediately order the desegregation of bus classes, that the board reconsider its choice of sites for the McDowell Elementary School and the Francis Parkman Junior High School, and the now dead Special Committee for Equality of Educational Opportunity, I love that term at the back end, opportunity, be reorganized so that it can face its responsibilities justly and realistically. Unless action on the above matter is taken by May 15th, the citizens of this city shall once more dramatize the evil of injustice perpetrated on Milwaukee children by the administrators and directors of the Milwaukee Public School System. Yours for equality now, Llyod Barbee. All right, here's what I like about that is I think its demands are very clear. And it's also extremely clear that it's not going to, as Martin Luther King would say, all here now. We want all of our rights. We want them here, and we want them now. Which, what else could one want? All right. So this is fascinating. I think, the modern day people could take some note of this. Here, they demanded the recreation of this committee, and they did it, apparently. And they're following up with this person saying, you're the chairman of this committee. Here's what we demand. Get on it. Okay? On Mr. Story, on May 2nd, Music wrote to the Board of School Directors with 3 specific demands regarding continuing problems of school segregation. At the regular school board meeting on May 4th, Music's letter was received and referred to your special committee on equality of educational opportunities. In view of that action, at the last regular board meetings in Milwaukee of Music on Friday, May 7th, it was voted. I was prepared for this, and I got this. I hope that was right. If it wasn't, we'll see what happens. It was voted that we request that a meeting of the Special Equality Committee be convened to explore methods of achieving maximum desegregation of the Milwaukee Public Schools. Now, let me tell you something. I'm guessing the reason why it's passive, though, is Llyod Barbee is trying to hide the fact that he was the one who pitched the idea. But hey, good leaders don't always take credit for their actions. A delegation from our organization would be happy to meet with the committee. We would like to first know the committee's plans for desegregation of the increasing number of racially concentrated schools. We would also like to present our views on the need for immediate implementation of desegregation plans before the end of this summer, and on the methods for doing so. We would like to meet with your committee prior to May 15th. Yours for equality now, Llyod A. Barbee. All right. We're just going to move right along here because that's a fine example. My guess is that the meeting with the Committee for Equality didn't go so well. So on July 27th of 65, Llyod Barbee and company writes this letter here. We're going to hit some highlights because it's like 10 pages. But number one thing that strikes me about this letter is how it seems exactly like the letter that many of you have written. Because I know that there are people out there who have written to the Secretary of Washington and said something needs to be done about MPS. And I also know that there are people out there who are shaming people for doing that same thing. And maybe calling that white supremacy, among other things. I don't know. But I do know that Llyod Barbee did it in 1965. So when is it appropriate to do it in 2025 or 2024? You tell me. All right. This is to request an investigation of racial segregation and discrimination practiced by the Milwaukee school system be immediately instituted by your office. It is further to request that all federal funds be withheld from this school system pending the outcome of this investigation. Okay? So just keep that in mind, that is not a new ask here. The request is being made by the Milwaukee United School Integration Committee. In March of '64, after the Board of School Directors cut off negotiation and communication with concerned citizens on the question of de facto segregation, that's something we're going to get into in another video, because I think it's so important here that we're not going to stop. But let's look at where we are today, all right? Music was organized to facilitate a unified, informed, and effective protest against the school board's refusal to deal with this crucial problem. Music now has both constituent memberships from various civic and religious groups and individual memberships from the growing number of Milwaukeeans, who are to see their schools operating according to the revered Republican principles of justice and equality. Doing the best we can here. All right. Now, there's some grievances that they have, and they're going to talk about key board members and the superintendent. And you tell me if those board members are not interchangeable with the board members of today, and the superintendent of yesterday, or Vincent, is not interchangeable with the superintendent today. However, in all seriousness, an indictment of the following schools on the grounds that they have done exceedingly grave disservice to all Milwaukee children by abdicating professionalism and responsibility and their respective positions as policymaker for the schools. Miss Lorraine Radke, president of the school board. That's interesting that it's a female back then. I mean, I guess in my mind, I also know that it's MISS. Number 2, Mr. Harold Story, chairman of the Special Committee on Equality of Educational Opportunity, which was created in '63 to deal with specifically with this de facto segregation charges, okay? How many people today remember of committees being created today to deal with issues today that have not been dealt with? Today. All right. Mr. John Foley, newly elected president of the school board and former member of the Equality Committee. And Mrs. Margaret Dings, a member of the Equality Committee. We also indict Mr. Harold Vincent, the superintendent of the Milwaukee school system, for failing to assume constructive leadership and seeking solutions to de facto segregation. Let's just try it out. We also indict Mr. Keith Posley, the superintendent of Milwaukee school system, for failing to assume constructive leadership solutions to de facto segregation. You tell me. All right. Now, this is a charge against the previous superintendent, previous board member, board chair, and I'm going to read it briefly here. That operating within the narrow bounds of what she conceived to be the dominant attitude of the community and of her own biased and unenlightened view, she deliberately used her position as president to prevent the constructive study and debate on a question. Could we say that of Marva Herndon? Very possibly. Could we say that of Bob Peterson, for example? I think the answer is probably yes. Thus, beginning in '64, the minutes of the Board and Equality Committee will show a progressive tightening of the parliamentary reins until at length, when anyone outside the majority group spoke, she simply did not listen except to time the gavel stroke, which ruled the offender out of order. She used her power, in other words, to stifle people's free speech. That's what I'm hearing there. citizens who attended the meeting were shocked and sickened at her arbitrariness in controlling a presumably democratic body. Does that sound different than what we've already put out here today? 2024, 1965. You tell me. This basically says that she created studies for the purposes of muddying the waters, and that they took a poll of certain employees that was by no means scientific. Does that sound like something you've heard before? All right. They're into this. This study got into their craw for some reason. Okay. This, I think, is worth quoting because it accurately reflects the attitude of the times. And if we are doing anything here, we are talking about history. So, this is from Miss Radke, I believe. According to the Milwaukee Journal, she said there paradoxes in the Negro's thinking which confused her. He says he hates the white man, yet he wants to integrate with him. He wants to copy the white people. He wants the same standard of living. And yet he says white people are all wrong. I would like to see him excel in areas which have not been thoroughly developed by white people. It could be stay in your lane, might be a translation for that. I think that the Negro has a great deal to offer our culture in the field of arts, music, and drama. That's why we have no schools available to them for that purpose. I mean, painting and sports. He, presumably that being the Negro, should develop his skills to the utmost. He should be original in his approach to living. He should realize that he need not imitate the white man to fulfill his culture. I think it's kind of cool, actually, that it always bothered me that when they would say he, referring to the Negro, that that was always, I mean, it was obviously patently sexist. And I think we have achieved something when we remove those kind of comments from our language there. I think they is better than he when we're referring to a group noun. That's true. All right. That I just absolutely fascinating. But part of what I'm saying is, do you think that we've heard similar statements by MPS administrators about similar things, similar groups of people today? You tell me. The complaints against Mr. Harold Story are equally serious. Something in his despotic, control of the Equality Committee proceedings, specifically his tyrannizing of the board, including the following actions. Wow. At the now notorious meeting of January 21st, 1965, when the civil rights leaders had been invited to answer board questions on their various charges, Mr. Story tried arbitrarily to admit only one, attorney Llyod Barbee, to the conference table. When the leaders protested and, rightfully, in my opinion, left the meeting, Mr. Story turned the meeting into a theatrical farce, ending with an insulting and patronizing lecture to Negroes on being reasonable. Have we ever, in 2024, had a patronizing lecture to Negroes on being reasonable by the Milwaukee Board of School Directors? How just about the public in general? Have we ever had a patronizing lecture to the public in general about being reasonable by the Milwaukee Public Board of School Directors? One wonders. Oh, here's a quote. Emotional disturbance of the kind we had here tonight is reflected in the attitude of Central City youngsters, he said. All right. I think that does. Here again, this is what we may call gaslighting today, but Here we go. Mr. Story decided, again, arbitrarily to turn the normally public equality committee into workshops where the board would purportedly study seriously the various purposes for relieving the ills of a de facto segregation in the city. Relieving, there we go. He tried on the workshop pretext to make those meetings secret. Thank goodness we have a public meetings law, and all school board meetings are now held in open. Or, sometimes I guess maybe if there's an attorney there, then we can't know about it. So hey, that's just what do you want? The emotional disturbances of those kind of people who want to hear what's going on in a session where there may be an attorney around, as reflected in the attitude of Northern Milwaukee professionals. All right, I'm having too much fun, and we'll wrap it up here. Okay. All right, here we go. I think the special committee has done an excellent job on this issue and has researched the matter thoroughly, Mr. Foley said. I think the chairman has done an excellent job. Here's Music speaking. Actually, since its last meeting in October of '64, the committee has been inoperative in spite of the fact that the Negro children have endured one more year of a situation that progressively worsens. I've nearly said that verbatim, I think. I certainly heard that many times in many school board meetings. All right, I think this is important quote here. Mr. Foley says that the neighborhood school system is the best method of education and that integration must come through housing. I would not change. I am very adamant on that view. I feel it is the only fair way for children to obtain the best education. All right. All right, now we're at the superintendent. Finally, to elaborate on the complaints against Mr. Harold Vincent, the superintendent of Milwaukee Schools, might well have surveyed the charges of de facto segregation in '63, taking note, as many other citizens did, that Milwaukee's problems, while serious, was indeed more easily solved than that of almost any other northern city. Might well have utilized all the facilities at his disposal and put his large and capable staff to work at searching out and evaluating all sorts of approaches to the problem. Might have sought the advice of both national experts and specialists from both local universities, and might certainly have found out what other cities were doing. Instead, Mr. Vincent has repeatedly brought to the board and equality committee only elaborate, detailed, time-wasting analysis of the way each policy is being carried out in the city. And with only one exception. All right. Is that any different than what we're hearing from Posley today? I don't know. You tell me. All right. Here's the last thing I want to point out from this letter, because I know this hasn't changed. I understand that MPS teachers are like 80% white, 20% non-white. And the teachers who are not white are very much clustered in the majority black schools. So here we'll read this. Number 2, this is the indictment of the superintendent, the placement of teachers. While the school board and administration may not, in fact, have caused de facto segregation of pupils, it remains a most perplexing question that 92% of Milwaukee's Negro teachers are in schools within the segregated boundaries. Mr. Vincent defends this with an elaborate detailing of such factors as the needs of the school, teacher qualifications, nearness to the teacher's home, and maintains that to deliberately place Negroes throughout the school system would be to make race a factor, something he insists the administration has never done. All of this have been seriously questioned by one more board member, but so far to no avail. Does that sound like 2024? To you? All right, this is the best closing paragraph of a 10-page letter, single-space letter ever. Fully cognizant of the length and detail of this letter and of the demands in your time, we present it as documentation of the desperate position this city is in. We deplore the fact that in this enlightened age, a whole city can be imprisoned by bigotry and children doomed because of the blindness and cowardice of a few people who hold positions of power. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We urgently request your help, the Executive Board of Music. All right. So this is pretty awesome. Dear concerned, September 1965. My guess is they didn't get everything they wanted. Dear concerned citizen, during the forthcoming school boycott beginning Monday, October 18th, music will conduct freedom schools for all children who participate. In the freedom schools, we hope to provide a creative learning milieu in which both Negro children and white children have a chance to learn about themselves and their world in a context which the Milwaukee schools virtually ignore. We tend to provide a curriculum which includes anthropology, sociology, Negro history, workshops on the civil rights movement, the philosophy and techniques of nonviolent direct action, the meaning and responsibilities of freedom, literature, writing, arts, dramatic musics, and whatever else possible with available teaching resources. That's pretty awesome. I hope you stuck with me because this is awesome. Schools will range from kindergarten to senior high school. To carry out this responsibility, we will need a complete and competent staff at each school, including teachers, aides, visiting lecturers, artists, musicians, discussion leaders, nurses, doctors on call, cooks, and anyone else with the skill or talent to contribute to the rich and rewarding learning experiences such schools can offer. Yeah. Can anybody here in Milwaukee today say that they've done anything like this? That's where I see the change. Not in the school board, but in the willingness of people to say that we're not putting up with this and we're going to put ourselves on the line for a whole week and create an alternative school system, whether you like it or not. Stick with us. We'll keep you informed.